This is your host, James, and I have a real super delight for my audience today. I'm going to be talking to a returning guest, Dr. Carmen Boulter, and I don't want to get complacent about returning guests. I have a habit of kind of doing that, but a little bit of biography about Carmen before I bring her on. She's a professor at the University of Calgary in Canada, teaches in the Graduate Division of Educational Research in the Faculty of Education. She's been researching and writing about the sacred feminine in ancient Egypt and goddesses around the world for 2 decades. Her book, Angels and Archetypes, which we did before, an evolutionary map of feminine consciousness, which I thoroughly enjoyed and I highly recommend, traces the fragments of information about matriarchal cultures in pre-dynastic Egypt, prehistoric Greece, and all around the world. And if you're going to understand the ancient world, you're going to have to understand what matriarchy and patriarchy is. And I'm so glad I did that book with Angels and Archetypes with Dr. Carmen Boulter. You can refer to her websites as we're going along today at pyramidcode.com. Where you'll see the documentary, The Pyramid Code. If you haven't seen that, then you don't understand Egypt. You need to get a copy of that too. And also interactive-u.com. So without further ado, let's bring on today's guest. Hi, Carmen. You're very welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks, James. Nice to be back.
Nice to have you back, Carmen. Wow, it's so long since I talked to you last. And I know we've got some mutual friends that interviewed you recently, and there's been recent discoveries. I mean, something also happened 24 hours ago in Egypt. I'm not sure if you caught that, Carmen, about a suicide bomber in Luxor.
I did catch that. I saw that. Yeah.
I don't know what to make of that. I mean, I think it was a lot smaller than people are making out. I don't think it's as big a thing, but it's obviously not good. It's obviously not good. I'm a little bit troubled about Egypt at the moment, but this stuff happens all the time. There's a little bit of a flare and then things die down. We are here to talk about different recent events. I know there's been discoveries at the Hawara complex. Tell us about this background to this labyrinth complex underneath the ground, Carmen. Great to have updates from you all the time. This place looks fascinating from what I've seen. Absolutely jaw-dropping, Carmen.
Jaw-dropping. It's been talked about for millennia. Herodotus talked about it in 450 BC. And then hundreds of years later, Strabo, Pliny, Sir William Flinders Petrie did an excavation there in 1881. But he went down through the Roman level and then the Ptolemaic level. And that's as far as he went. And he said that there was water underneath. And so people have avoided excavating there because there happens to be a canal over the top. And they thought they were going to have to move the canal to do the excavation. And so everything ground to a halt in 2008. And then I ended up taking an interest in it again. Now, I've been looking for a deep, large underground complex for 25 years. Mm-hmm. And so I spent 5 years in and out of the tunnels inside on the Giza plateau. And then I found a site that may have been it. And I led an expedition there in February 2012, and it turned out to be modern. It turned out to be a target for the Air Force.
Wow.
And then, so I kept having the past life memories and having people talk about a site that was really, really old and really deep. And it seemed to be all coming together in terms of the characteristic features that various psychic people I knew were referring to, but nobody could place it. So I thought, well, maybe we can do a satellite scan of this, but nobody had the coordinates of it. So I did the needle in the haystack on Google Earth and found the coordinates. And Klaus Dona called me 5 minutes after I found it. And I went, Klaus, I think I found something. And he said, send me the Google Earth file. And 2 days later, he started sending me impressions of what's down there at great depth. So this technology is state of the art, and it's able to look through layers. So the old GPR, ground penetrating radar, once it hit something, it couldn't look through it. And that's the beauty of this. And it has different signatures for bone and precious metals and all these different things. So they run a different scan based on the signature of what's down there. So there are a total of 82 chambers. On one side, there's 2 distinct levels. There's 31 chambers on one and 32 in the other. And then on a third construction on the other side of the canal. And these chambers are all on the one side bigger than the average size house, but 6 of them are bigger than the average size swimming pool. And there's 63 of these chambers and a kilometer and a half of tunnels to connect them.
Colossal, Carmen. This is colossal statistics.
Colossal. And the area on the edges of it is 81 football fields.
What?
And it's deep. So one level is more than 50 feet deep and one level is more than 120 feet deep.
Could this be somehow, Carmen, a natural feature that's been manipulated and carved by human hands to exploit the natural? We know they did that in the Valley of the Kings. They exploited natural cracks to carve out tombs. Could they have done this to a labyrinth of natural caves?
Well, this would be like burying a few airports. I don't think so. The chambers are far too big for that. At the size of an Olympic-sized swimming pool, like think about how big that is. I put it into metaphors because it was just inconceivable. And it took me about a week to measure it and then turn it into square footage and stuff. So it's just like, it's like a number of different Costco's. It's just so enormous and so deep that I don't think it is. We can't tell until we excavate. I don't know if it's even possible to get permits to excavate, even though there's been several attempts to apply, and that keeps changing about who, what, where, how. And so I've got 1 foot on the shore. I'm not sure if we'll actually get to go and dig. It's possible. But in the meantime, what's happening with other scans that have been done is in other countries, it's easier to get permits, and governments seem to understand that tourism is a good thing. And so wherever they've said they found water and the flow rate and the depth, when they go to dig, they're finding it exactly. And so
accuracy.
They found diamonds in Brunei and gold in Bolivia and oil and gas in various places, but the company with the scan doesn't want to encourage oil and gas because it's not good for the planet. But they found the entrance to the Bosnian pyramids. They found a number of different things with this scan, and it's very, very accurate. And there's a device that goes on site that makes it even more accurate. So I think it's pretty safe to say there's something really, really remarkable down there.
It's incredible. Let's mention, Klaus Donner is no stranger to the show, Carmen, as you know, but we have new listeners all the time. Tell us a little bit about Klaus Donner and his technology and the interaction, how that came about, Carmen.
Well, I met him at the Bosnian pyramids, and we were both speaking at the Hidden Mysteries conference. And he's honored there because he actually said the door to the tunnel chamber is right here. Now, Klaus was organizing exhibitions for museums. And several years ago, somebody sent him an out-of-place artifact exhibit. And he said, well, I'll have it for 3 months. I'll find out where each and every one of these things came from. And then, solve the mystery. And at the end of the 3 months, he said, nope, I don't know where any of this came from. So then he turned his attention to studying and investigating out-of-place artifacts. And in countries like Egypt and other places as well, if you're digging a well in your house in the Valley of the Kings or whatever, and you hit something and it's an artifact, you're trying to get water. The government will throw you in jail for stealing it and take your house. So when people find things, they certainly don't want to keep it, but they also don't want to call the government. So they're calling Klaus. And so what he leaves the things in situ or in a museum and takes photographs of them, but he's finding all these connections of a unified writing that went around the world, even finding this strange runic writing in the debris inside the tunnels of the Bosnian pyramids. So we're talking a lot of different places. So, and the other thing is that he's had a lot of trouble with dating because nobody wants anything to be older than 6,000 years in Peru, for example.
Gotcha.
And so he'd find something that he thought was several 100,000 years old, and it would come back, 4,820. And you don't have to pay, by the way, and they'd take over a year. So what's happening is the labs are corrupt and they're not giving the real date. Yeah. So, you not only have, there's so much corruption and we live in a sea of lies. And what we're doing as truth seekers is looking to find some truth and some connections between these places. So,
on the 6,000-year-old mystery, Carmen, I have no doubt there was a lot of activity around the 6,000-year-old mark. But to think that our civilization just started, in its full peak at 6,000 years is just a ludicrous concept, which I don't think anybody's buying anymore, Carmen. I think it's pretty much on the way out, that one. But yes, I think there was a peak of activity around then, maybe reenacting from a cataclysm. We can talk about that later, I guess. This technology then that Klaus is embracing, I know I spoke to him in Bosnia and he alluded to a lot of stuff that he was working on. There is a little bit of secrecy involved until he can negotiate with the right authorities and, get the technology to where it has to go without, and there's always negotiation on with any business. But he's alluded to a lot of stuff what he's doing. This is just super technology. Let's focus on that. I mean, it's almost like the fMRI scans where we can peer inside the brain. If you want to compare it to that, I mean, you can just peer inside the levels of the crust of the earth, basically.
Yeah, it is super powerful. Now, what it is a live satellite scan, so it's high definition. But what his company has done is applied a software technology that is looking for the longitudinal waves, and it's technically put into Maxwell equations, and the common thing that we would recognize would be barcodes in a grocery store.
Gotcha.
Where they can say how many they've got on the shelf, the different everything, and the price and all that. And so each element has a different signature. And so they run the scan for water. They run the scan for gold. They run the scan for bone and anomalies of chambers as well. So they can see if there's something in the chamber. So it's really quite fascinating. But the thing is that you still have to have the interface to then go and investigate, because sure, in terms of research methodology, this is a hypothesis. This is something that could be, and then you've got to go and verify before you can say it's a quote unquote discovery. You have to do an excavation. And archaeology is a destructive science. So the place will never look the way it did. And that's what an archaeological dig is. But the other thing about archaeology is older is deeper. So this is so deep, it's going to be really old. And if you think about the pyramid code, measuring from the top of a pyramid to the Nile, this is 30 kilometers from the Nile. Mm-hmm. Sphinx is 8 miles from the Nile. Mm-hmm. Like, this has got to be really old if the Nile is that far.
Wow. And of course, the ability to be able to pick out pottery, water, metals, bones, ceramics, stuff like that. I mean, the power of that, the power of technology for archaeology now as an aid, is fantastic in itself. But to be able to be digging up stuff on location and then proving the accuracy of your scans, this is the key thing, Carmen. I think it's going to only be another few more places that they guys will do this, that they will turn around and say, look, the accuracy keeps coming here. I mean, you guys are going to have to start responding to this.
Well, you can say that to the government all you want, and they may or may not respond. But the interesting thing about this site, as far as I know, there's no pottery, which is just, we've got, as investigators, we've got to piece together this story mm-hmm. as best we can. And so like Göbekli Tepe, that was also decommissioned like the Bosnian pyramids, filled up with rubble mm-hmm. in anticipation of the flood. You see, a lot of this stuff is relating now. In anticipation of the flood, they decommissioned both Göbekli Tepe in Turkey and the tunnels underneath the Bosnian pyramids.
Gotcha.
And they didn't find any pottery at Göbekli Tepe. And so there's 22 temples, and they're all arranged in a circular kind of fashion, with animal symbols, astrological sort of things. And so it seemed to be a place of worship at the top of a mountain, at the high up, and or some kind of ritual, okay? And so, but this place, nothing connects. It doesn't connect up and down between the two levels at all. So that, to me, speaks of two distinct civilizations, two distinct groups that would have built it. And it's not a temple. It doesn't, like in the Egyptian temples, one room leads to the next until you get to the Holy of Holies at the back of the temple. And all those temples are made in a pattern that represent the cavities of the human body. And as you walk through, they open to each other. Well, these are more like separate individual rooms that don't connect. So that speaks to me of some kind of repository.
Storage vaults.
Yes, but also I've been working with this idea, and as I say, it's reflecting what more than, several people have been coming to me over the years. There seems to be a light key technology or something going on down there in the places that these people are having their experiences, where they approach and it's dark, and as they move through, it lights up. And that there's something about the light signature that is allowing them in the psychic space to penetrate into these chambers. Mm-hmm. And apparently there's a lot of symbols on them, but some of them are empty without any symbols on them. So that's kind of like the Great Pyramid that would have been like an energy device. And so, I mean, it's mind-boggling really, because I don't think we have within our framework anything that has looked like this before. Now, in a way, that's a blessing because it's not the same old. So it may speak to something that we've all been looking for.
Sure.
But when you think about, the dispersion of pottery technology in the whole Arabian Peninsula over 3,000 years, you see patterns. And so, there's archaeologists that have put this together over a long period of time. Frankincense and myrrh trade routes in the Arabian Peninsula, 4,000 years, where you go from place to place to place and find similar styles of pottery, similar kinds of encampments and everything. And so we can say, okay, this is known over this, and that's a longer period of time. 4,000 years is a long period of time. And you can say, okay, we've seen this before. But I think, the archaeologists are going to look and say, we've never seen anything like this.
This is incredible stuff. From what I've seen so far, I'm so excited about this place. Just to know that we have it, it's there, it can be researched. I don't know when that's going to be, Carmen. As you say, there's a lot of politics involved. There's a lot of people controlling, this territory, whether, and not just Egypt, all places around the world, whether people get to dig or not. We have our own place in Ireland here where, there's a chamber covered, and it's probably the biggest thing in the county in Sligo. And they won't dig it up. It's mind numbing that people just won't do that. They won't just jump to it. Yeah, I understand there's a protocol, and I understand, there's an infrastructure and a policy that has to be followed. Are we going to get a chance to dig this up, Carmen? Are we going to have to wait for the politics to settle down? What's the process for Egypt to get access to this, for it to be dug up?
Well, the only thing is the Supreme Council of Antiquities permit to excavate. And I have been in 2 different situations working on that. And there's 12 pages of guidelines. And the first point is no new permits to excavate will be granted in Upper Egypt, and in brackets it says Giza to Abu Simbel, which is practically the whole country. And so apparently this place has an exception on it, but I know there's several teams over the past, that have tried to excavate there. Now they had no idea that it was needed, the depth was needed, and there has been research done, with ground penetrating radar where you lay the wires right on the sand. But nobody's gotten a permit yet, and the application process keeps going sideways. So apparently there's 35 new ministers coming in.
Wow.
In a couple of weeks. And apparently the minister in charge of this before, up until this point, has, basically been saying, no foreign missions, only Egyptian archaeologists. And it seems like the rules keep changing. They don't want people who already excavated there. And every time I hear something about it, it seems to have changed. So I was working on a list of archaeologists that would have had the experience in that area, in the field, to think on their feet and do the responsible kind of thing. And I was actually tasked with finding that. And it's hard to say. It's hard to say where it's at and how it's going to go. And so, like I say, I've had a foot on the shore. I think it's still important to know what's down there, whether or not, we can't force their hand. And I know it's for humanity. And the other reason I wanted to be involved was because of the aspect of filming it. Because any discovery can be buried, it can be twisted, it can be reported incorrectly. And so I wanted to be able to have a live camera there,
document it,
show people and document it, that it's in my possession, and then I can show it.
Wow. Oh yeah, for sure, Carmen. That's the key thing, to document this stuff in real time. There's so much surreptitious and clandestine activities going on. Who do you trust anymore? Just for the listeners, Carmen, build a picture for the audience here. The terrain where this is at, from either, talk about the map location, basically where this is situated from Cairo, and the surrounding terrain.
It is 95 kilometers south of Cairo. And it has a pyramid there. And as I said, it's got a irrigation canal over the top. And there's things that have been found all the way around the pyramid, but mostly in the upper levels, as I said. And so it's close to the Fayum Oasis. So when you look at the map of Egypt, there's an upside down leaf, and it's in that area. And so but there's all kinds of legends though about a lake that was there and pyramids on an island in the lake. And from that pyramid, and this is typical in Egypt, and you've seen it in the Pyramid Code, there's another pyramid about 20 miles away that you can see, which is astonishing because I wasn't expecting that at all.
Wow.
I did go there a few weeks ago, and I climbed to the top of the pyramid and, surveyed the site, and Klaus says there's no water down it, that there's a few puddles, I call them, underneath. And so that makes the idea of excavating a lot easier. So it's a large site that basically sits there by itself. It wasn't unknown to the ancients, but it kind of became unknown to us. But what was found there before is now in the Petrie Museum in London.
Oh yeah, beautiful museum.
And Flinders Petrie put it online. So there's wooden sarcophagi, and they would paint the face of the deceased on the sarcophagus itself. So I'm told these are the oldest realistic portraits of humans that we have. They're not stylized. They look like the person. So that's an interesting thing in itself. But why would the Anthony Cleopatra time frame go there and Roman go there and build a little village over the top? Well, because the site was known. It came down through an oral tradition. And then, so 4 distinct layers at different levels. It's fascinating. From an archaeological standpoint, it's fascinating.
Wow. Oh, I love the Petrie Museum in London. It's one of the London's best kept secrets. You don't seem to market it as good. A lot of people never even heard of it, but it's in the top 10 Egyptology museums in the world. Fascinating place. And I love what Petrie did as well, Carmen. He picked up all the artifacts and the bits that nobody else wanted. All the other archaeologists were ignoring this stuff, the cores, the drill holes, any of the broken pieces, what we would call rubbish in archaeological times. He picked it up and he documented it. Proper archaeologist, Well,
the thing though is that he worked from 1881 to 1891, so 10 years of digging in Egypt. But archaeology didn't start till 1910. I studied archaeology at the graduate level, and basically in terms of it being a science, it hadn't even started yet. And so he did a very good job, I think, of documenting and making drawings, and that's how I found the site and aligned it with Google Earth. It was his map.
Wow.
So I just kept on looking for the characteristics. I couldn't tell the difference between the roads and the canals at first. And I literally took me 2 days, needle in a haystack, but I found it. Yeah.
Wow. Commend you on that, Carmen. Carmen, so this place is known in Herodotus' time, 450 BC. They most likely built this over, in that time period. That's the Cleopatra time period, I believe. So they built over this ancient site. That was a common theme in ancient Egypt. I mean, I think we're closer to Cleopatra than Cleopatra was to the start of the pyramid building, the old kingdom.
Cleopatra's time was 75 BC, 79 BC, and Herodotus was 450 BC. So because we've compressed time, and the Bible and school wants us to think we're 6,000 years old, it's hard for us to think back in these chunks of time. But to me, the most fascinating part is everybody who wrote about it couldn't possibly have been speaking to each other because they're too distant in time.
Sure. It's amazing how stories can survive, though, Carmen. It's amazing how legends or bits of fragments of evidence can survive through story and word of mouth and oral histories. So, this place seems to be in our aspect today. It seems to be out of the way, Carmen. And even when you talk about this lake that's not there anymore, that speaks of geological time, not normal time, geological time, like eons. God knows.
Well, we drove to the lake, and it was 40 kilometers away, the lake. But I had never been there to this Lake Moeris. It's called Moeris. And it's astounding. It's salt water, and it's enormous, absolutely enormous. And so it is about geological time. There's also people and old maps that talk about the water going all the way to Giza and there being a relationship between Giza and this site. I'm like, wait a minute, that's a lot of water. And that precludes the Nile. But then, when we're talking these huge geological timescapes, it may make sense. I mean, when Antoine Gigal started talking about Giza being an island, I just rejected that completely. I just couldn't imagine how that would work. If the Band of Peace is going along the Nile, how can Giza be an island? And so there's still some big questions there because I can't imagine that whole region being covered in water. And so there's some work to do in terms of, digging into the geological record as well to see if it's even possible. But it changes things if it was, because when, Edgar Cayce talked about being below the left paw of the Sphinx, and some people say right paw, and then I started saying beneath because it's in front of and beneath, because the plateau is anything but flat. Mm-hmm. But if you just go straight south, south, where are we going here? Yeah, that's south. Okay, so that would be, so this site is south of the Giza plateau. So who knows? Mm-hmm. We'll see. But I mean, I'm not going to leave this alone. I'm going to continue to investigate and find out whatever I can, from a theoretical standpoint. If the opportunity arises to actually be on the dig, I'm happy to go.
That's what I love about your research, Carmen. You're a tenacious lady who gets out there and, and is doing this for all the right reasons, Carmen. You're pursuing this for the truth, for humanity, for the knowledge. It's a global treasure. It's not just an Egyptian treasure, and at least Egyptians do recognize that. That the monuments are the world heritage. They are a heritage for the world, and I commend you on that, Carmen. We're just coming up to break, so just for the webpage, you can go to capricornradio.com for the free archives and capricornmembers.com for the HD TV and MP3 archives. But for now, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be back in just a moment. There is something majestic in the land of Ireland. This is known the world over. The Celtic Irish are descendants of the Tuatha De Danann, a mysterious, supernatural race of gods written about in ancient Irish Gaelic texts. This is the basis for all Irish mythology, and our megalithic ancestors are interlinked with these peoples. You have a chance to come and see these monuments and temples for yourself. The megalithic landscape is rich in the realms of myth, legend and wisdom. Come see all this on the most spectacular Sacred Sites tour in March 2016. This Sacred Sites and Equinox tour is not to be missed. Tour highlights include Grinnin of Ailloch Observatory, the Giant's Ring Henge and Dolmen, St. Patrick's Day Special at St. Patrick's Ancient Chair, March 17th, Knockmany Passage Tomb linked to the Queen Maeve with special access, Beemore Temple Complex, Dunluce Castle, the Giant's Causeway, Beltany Stone Circle, Kilclooney Dolmen, and the Loughcrew Equinox Event Alignment. Of course, we will see the famous tombs of Newgrange, Noath and Doath, also Fornox Rock Art and Shamanic Chamber, Tara Hill Complex, and we're going to finish at the Tuatha De Danann's origins in the northwest of Ireland at Carrowkeel, dated 3500 BC, and the famous Carrowmore 5000 BC complex. Check out all the full itinerary on the Tours Events page for more details at jamesswagger.com. Welcome back to Capricorn Radio. This is your host James, and don't forget to check out the archives at capricornmembers.com. You can subscribe for membership, doing a lifetime membership deal at the moment. And of course you can still check out the free archives at capricornradio.com. And then HDTV shows as well on the Capricorn members page. But for now, let's talk about these two layers, Carmen, because so we have the pyramid and then there's another complex. I think there's 4 layers, but there's the two that we're talking about, the discoveries from the scans. These two layers, they're not connected in any way. Is that correct?
They're not connected in any way, and they are 60 feet apart.
Does that speak of different time frames then, Carmen?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And they don't look, I've been staring at these scans for a couple of months now.
Yeah.
And they don't look like the same. And the interesting thing is when I plotted the actual size of the rooms and made charts about it in Excel, none of the chambers were the same size. They look almost like a scale. So 32 on one level, 31 on the other, almost like a major and a minor scale. So there may be something to the size and shape of the rooms that spoke to their function. So I don't think it can be a temple. I don't think it was ever above ground and it filled in like the Sphinx would fill up to its neck. So it wasn't a place anybody lived. It wasn't a place anybody did ritual, I don't think. And so I think it's two different time frames. So of course people want me to speculate with what I know. And so I say that in 1973 I did my first past life regression, even though I'd had past life memories. And the first thing the regressionist said to me was that I had been on an evacuation committee when they already knew that Atlantis was going to sink.
Sure.
Or a big disaster was coming. And so that's what's fueled, that's one of the incarnations that's fueled my desire to find these things. And like I said, 25 years of this. And so think if it was you and me and 10 other people and, we're there around a boardroom table saying, well, what are we going to do? What are we going to do with our stuff, our technology, the people? How do we relocate? Where's the impact going to be? Is there anywhere that's going to be safe? Or is this just going to be a total worldwide calamity? So the other thing is that happened in Atlantis 3 times. There are ancient texts available out there that speak of a prophecy of Atlantis going down. So I don't think the first time that they knew how to predict. The second time, the disaster, I'm told, 17,500 BC. The third one is all documented on the calendar of catastrophes on the ceiling of the Temple of Dendera, and that's 13,660 years ago. And Svetlana Pavlova deciphered what those messages were, both the round zodiac at Dendera and the first hypostyle hall. And it's very clear once you understand what's going on these codes, you can see that before the flood and after the flood. So this upper layer of the two, I call it the blue layer, could have been one of those disasters in Atlantis. So I think that the decision was to colonize various places on the planet and build these straight-sided functional pyramids that were actually on the telluric lines of the earth, and they're functional energy machines. And so again, we've missed a lot of this because if it was pre-diluvial, then the silt from the flood would have been on top of the straight-sided pyramids and plenty of it, 3-4 feet deep, to be able to grow trees there. And so there's pyramids in South Africa. We've seen them, Bosnia, Serbia, 3 new ones in Ecuador, Alaska,
Peru.
Peru, Gunung Padang. I mean, there are pyramids that are showing up and China that are covered in trees. And so because the trees are all different heights, when you look from a distance, it doesn't look straight-sided, and excavation is, a very lengthy process. And so it stands to reason that these pyramids would have been put there before the flood, and that it could have easily been a worldwide calamity. But that doesn't mean that everybody died. We see the Cave of the Swimmers in the English Patient, and some people would have swam to the high plateau at Gilf Kabir, for example, in Egypt, and then start again to say, okay, where's Sirius, where's Orion, and measure up and start to track the stars. And so the first thing they would have done is try to orient themselves. Where are we in the solar system? Where are we in the galaxy? And it's the same thing as here. If the grid went down and we're living in cold conditions, we don't stay in our house. We go find somewhere we can build a fire to keep warm. We're walking around with the shirt on our back and hopefully something warm. And it's not that we didn't have technology the day before. It's that the grid went down.
Sure.
Right? Starting over.
Yeah. I think about 20 years ago when I started getting into ancient mysteries and ancient history, Carmen, in my mid-teens, and I just loved it. Growing up on Hancock and Boval and John Anthony West in mid-90s, I just loved it. And I always thought, that these guys were up against it, and they were. But it's like to say Atlantis these days is a different thing. These guys, when, research back there, if you mentioned the word Atlantis in that era, in that epoch, it was, you would be shunned, but, I think the research into Atlantis now is a lot more acceptable, at least in terms of the two aspects. You can say there's the flood, aspect, and then there's the prehistory, the civilization aspect. But the flood myths, as it's being called, all around the world, all these ancient cultures. I mean, there's evidence turning up left, right, and centre. In County Clare in Ireland this year, I think it was, we have some flood layer being deposited about 6000 BC. There's evidence of this layer. Now, not that there was only one flood, there's probably a series of cataclysms. But I think the flood research and this idea of Atlantis being sunken, do you have a location for it, Carmen? Do you feed into the geographics of the Atlantis? Do you have your best guess of what Atlantis was, where it was, stuff like that?
Well, and you even said it, it's the Atlantis myth. And it doesn't matter how much evidence we're finding, and, linking it to a very advanced civilization that no doubt would have been seeded by advanced beings from before. I think that this is it here. If you watch documentaries, and there's plenty of them on Atlantis, it seems like they want to debunk.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of different places. And they say, well, if they didn't find elephants, it's not really there. I mean, it's really, really, really like the worst kind of academic dissing of things. So my conviction is it was a worldwide seafaring culture. They built their cities in the same style because it was seafaring. And there are circular cities that have been found underwater, above water, and all of that. So when you say Bimini, just off the Straits of Gibraltar, the Azores, the high Altiplano in South America, I say all of the above. Atlantis covered the world, and the place where the asteroid hit or where there was a weakness in the continental plates is, maybe where the epicenter of the thing was, and that the main city called Poseidon went down there. But, you can go straight up the mountains, the Alpujarras, and then up the Sierra Nevadas right there, and Spain, where it's a half-hour ferry ride to Morocco. Now, these circular cities, the ships would come in and turn left and go around and stop and drop off their cargo and get more, and keep going in the same direction counterclockwise and out the other side. And so, well, maybe they went around the other way. I mean, my conviction is it went around. I don't even know why I say they went around counterclockwise, but the point is kind of like the restrooms at the airport where you've got your wheelie bag, and maybe that's why, because we go left and then come out right. And then, everybody keeps circulating, but that's the metaphor for these ships. And everything was about, they were able to be at sea for a long time. They had desalination technology. They were able to grow fruits and vegetables right on the boats. And so it wasn't like, people getting scurvy and people getting lost. They basically spent, their culture was all about moving around the planet on ships.
Wow. I have no doubt for the global civilization. I definitely, when you look at the linguistic evidence, when you look at the writing popping up, Phoenicians is probably a great example for the Phoenicians being everywhere, Brazil and Middle East. Fragments of the mythology as well, all matching up, all coming up with the same archetypes or mythologies, and then there's the flood stuff as well. I mean, you look at it all together, it doesn't seem to be a big reach, Carmen. It seems to be a bit of a no-brainer that it's finally sinking into the consciousness.
No pun intended. Sinking in.
Yeah.
But the thing too is like, who seeded them? Okay, so I'm saying, and I'm saying this, linking it to past life recall, and of course, I'm not sure, but it makes sense. And it, because I've been looking for it, I feel a sense of satisfaction that this could be something like that. But what about before that? And how did the Atlanteans develop all this technology? Did they have ancestors that made them wise and gave them building techniques and all of that, and sacred geometry and astronomy and all that? And I think that makes sense. So for all the UFOs came and the Sitchin 450,000 years ago, they came and enslaved us. I think, and having a PhD in linguistics, I understand how the slightest turn of phrase, in Chinese, they sit in a chair, we sit on a chair. These little things can change a whole meaning. But they say we were enslaved. Well, what's the purpose of that? Does that make us think we're not enslaved now? They were more enslaved 450,000 years ago, and we're so lucky now. Anyway, Sitchin was making declarations, but perhaps something did happen 450,000 years ago. Fair enough. And everyone, lots of people are really curious about disclosure and finally getting the story out about, but I also think we make a mistake there where, we're in cars and scooters, bicycles, whatever. So we're kind of into the vehicle idea. So we place in our unconscious or whatever that the aliens are in spaceships. But, how else could they have come here? Could they have shapeshifted? Did they need reorientation chambers? Did they have to put their equipment somewhere? We haven't really situated that. Because we haven't had full disclosure and because we don't really know how to trace things that old, because we've compressed everything into the last 6,000 years of patriarchal time, we're kind of at a loss. But and we don't know what's down there. Like if we were able to do a borehole and put the 3D camera around and see what's really on the walls, and even nothing on the walls would be interesting. Why are these chambers so big? What are they for? But there's been talk over time, and there's people like in the Keys of Enoch and Enochian magic, that talk about preserving equipment needing reorientation. There is talk of this. It sounds legendary, but how can we put these pieces together to actually make sense? Of course, we won't be sure. We may still not be sure even after an excavation, but I think it speaks to the idea of like a storage repository from a very, very old culture.
Yeah. I'm not a biblical expert, but I think the Book of Enoch is one of the most remarkable texts ever. It just speaks so much weird and wonderful stuff. But yeah, Carmen, what are we talking? Are we talking like nuts and bolts, physical technology? Are we talking seed vaults or both or everything? If they were protecting themselves from a flood, perhaps then they took everything they needed. Seed vaults are, it's a common idea now. We're doing it ourselves in the modern world. Maybe it's not just seed vaults though. It's high tech technology as well.
Okay, so in 1996, I was at the Star Visions conference in Santa Fe, and a woman named Chelsea Floor was speaking, and she put up this chart, and they said it was the Great Pyramid, and these two gentlemen went 2/3 of the way up on the west face of the Great Pyramid, is what they said, and then they did this abracadabra kind of mantra, and a rock moved, and it revealed a passage that went down, 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 staircases, down so far. I remember reading this then in 96 and feeling just creepy about how musty and dusty and old everything sounded and how far they had to go. So if you think the Great Pyramid's 386 feet high and they went down, down, down below the Earth's surface, and then they arrived to this perfectly clean, well-lit series of huge rooms. And so, this is a dramatic story. I was absolutely riveted to this story. I could not put it down till I read the whole thing. And I really felt like I was tapping into something I knew, or resonated with or whatever. And what they talked about are these discs, that had chips out of them that sounded like they were cogs in a bigger machine or some kind of a computer, huge. Wow. They were large. And then they talked about these different codes and equipment. And that as they moved between the rooms, they lit up. They also talked about these portholes, which, let's not confuse the word, but these round kind of windows that they felt like someone was watching them. And that maybe it connected to something that was, inner earth, or who knows? This is all really weird stuff. But I thought, well, how clever. All they had to do was say it was the Great Pyramid, and then no one would go looking because it wasn't really the Great Pyramid. So that's all you have to do to code your work. And so much stuff says it's the Great Pyramid. And perhaps, a lot of it isn't. So it's, I'm not saying that there aren't that there isn't a huge network of passageways under Giza, which, if you can think about it, over the millennia, no one has ever excavated. No one. They're not allowed to. And they Zahi cemented over a lot of it, to the left side of the Sphinx, because I've got a picture from 1910 that shows a temple of Isis at the ground the top of it was at the ground level. So that no doubt would have been underground. So, there's a lot, and all the way from Abu Raush down to Saqqara at least, and I suspect to Dashur, is a network of these passageways. Mm-hmm. But it didn't happen to be the only place, and it didn't happen to be the place I was looking for. So after 5 years of supervised time in and out of those holes, I concluded that this isn't it. There's something down there, but not what I'm looking for. So,
Carmen, let's paint a better picture now. Now that we've had a chat for a while. So we're saying a prehistory Doric civilization. I'm come to accept that, and then we have a flood, which was probably serious cataclysms, major one, a couple of small ones, mini ones, perhaps. But even if then there were survivors and the survivors come and set up camp again, they're not going to just set up camp as if everything was just the way it was before. What if another flood came in? Or, so it makes sense. It's just common sense that there was, underground caverns, underground repositories. It's just a basic idea. I mean, that's what you would do. Even if you survived the flood, you would just put stuff in a repository.
Right. Now think about the pyramids were designed to withstand anything. And it's known in Atlantis that there were 3 worldwide catastrophes. Okay. And a great distance apart. So they would, they wouldn't necessarily be connected. And there's time in the precessional cycle of 26,000 years to be in a golden age and then a Iron Age, so to be totally refined and then totally, opposed each other, fighting, warring, that kind of thing. But a pyramid, the construction of these straight-sided pyramids, which is repeated, I'm not talking step pyramids, flat-top pyramids, I'm talking the straight-sided pyramids, that they have passageways underground, they have water underground, but the way they're constructed is on a shallow, inverted pyramid. So that if you can just, imagine, hold your hands up, at just a slight angle with your palms facing up. And so what would happen is these large blocks of stone, if there was an earthquake or even a flood, they would shake themselves tighter. So instead of breaking apart, any kind of, earthquake, flood, that kind of impact of an asteroid or something would cause the pyramids to be stronger, not weaker. How clever is that?
This pyramid building, Carmen, let's tackle this question or concept. I mean, to have all these pyramids around the planet, this wasn't just an idea that a civilization transported to and from each other. There was a worldwide reason for this. There was a worldwide, is it right to say that? There was a worldwide global reason for that. And it brings in the grid theory. The grid is the only thing that really substantially makes sense to me.
Well, exactly. And you keep coming back to it makes sense. Well, that's what we're looking to, we're still, way out in trying to find something that's plausible. But these pyramids have similar structure. And there's 7 different characteristics that make them energy machines, and they were strategically placed. And how were they built? It seems to me that they had, anti-gravity devices, sound and light technology, and using geopolymers, poured stone. So taking broken pieces of granite, for example, or sandstone, and then putting them in with natron. So Joseph Davidovich has talked about this, and I think it's quite conclusive. And so natron is what they used in mummification to dry the organs out, and it took 70 days, which is the amount of time that Sirius disappears, 70 days beneath the horizon, and then it's got the heliacal rising. So they were drying out this cement, if you will, and when they analyze a poured granite block and a carved granite block, they can't tell the difference once the thing is dried. So it seems that they were pouring the stone. And this speaks to Machu Picchu and to Abu Raush, that's up a mountain first. So, how do you get the stone? It's one thing to get the stone up the pyramid, but to get it up the mountain before you get it up the pyramid, now that's talking a whole different thing. But in terms of building the pyramids the way we're told, what do you do when you're at the top? If you're pulling it with levers and all that, and you get to the top of the pyramid, where does everybody stand to put the stone? It seems much, much more logical that they were able to pour the stones in situ and then remove the frame. Wow. Now, I think I'm concluding as well, I haven't heard anybody else say this, that the temple walls with the frescoes were also poured. So the construction of the temple, the pillars, the walls themselves is one thing, but then there's a layer over the top that has the decorative bits and the gods and goddesses and the hieroglyphic and that sort of thing. Mm-hmm. And it took me a long, long time to notice this, going to Egypt as many times as I have, 29 times, and living over there for a couple of years. At Kamumbo, the passageway that goes to the little chambers at the back behind the Holy of Holies has Hapi and Isis with blue lotus draped over their arms. And there's like a procession going all the way back, but it comes the other way as well. And it's the same, but there's another temple that has the same. So they would have used the same molds in more than one place. And you also see places where that separates off and falls down. And then you see the back, what's holding it up on the pillar or the temple wall. So that's how they ended up discovering those helicopters and the helicopter and the flying machines at Abydos. Was someone had covered it up, and then the lintel fell down.
Wow.
Yeah, and then it was underneath. So there's been layers and layers and layers in Egypt as well. But I do think that but the other thing about the pyramids is that they are functional energy machines, if you will, but it's based on the quartz crystal and the double helix of it under pressure. So I'll send you some photographs, actually.
Oh, please
do. Some film strips that show that in the so-called dead or empty places, that's the wrong word, of the pyramid, that there are, like, Valery Uvarov built a functional pyramid. And in Siberia, in the center of the landmass there. And the premise is the double quartz helix, and all of this is part of my new series, The New Atlantis. Wow. Under pressure, that gives the energy generating in there, and it has to do with quartz. So all of the stones inside are quartz based, and wow. Then he's got all these quartz crystals that are like 14 feet high. I mean, there's a photograph in there where there's people standing next to it. The quartz crystals taller than them, much taller than them. Yeah. And so that's how he did it, and he used crushed crystal polymer. White and black going around like the arms of the galaxy. So the inverted pyramid first, and then this spiral black, white that's representing the galaxy. Then these big pyramids, and then the poured stone over the top, and the casing stone was almost like that fondant. I don't even know what you call it. The icing that you would put on a cake that then kind of sets and kind of becomes a little hard. So they poured on this, and I saw the pyramid before and after they put these casing stones on, crushed quartz polymer, and it finished shiny and flat, translucent. And then they literally took a big quartz pyramidion for the top. Amazing. And so this machine, it works. It has energetic effects that have been measured. People have spontaneous healings in there, and it's operational now. And the idea is they're putting in the canals around this first pyramid, and I can see it from Google Earth. I've located it, and then the waterways go around, and then 4 pyramids around that, another set of waterways, and 4 pyramids around that. So I don't know if they finished building those other 8 pyramids as part of the complex, but the idea is it's called Project 12, and they have all this high level technology in different domains: education, technology, communication, like that. And that's what they called the New Atlantis. And that's why my series is called the New Atlantis, because this was triggered by, long conversations with Valery Uvarov. And he asked me to build this series. And then it turned out the funding fell through, but I'm finishing it anyway. Yeah.
I've had the pleasure of meeting Valery Uvarov, lovely guy, really super nice guy, a lot of time for Valery, and he's offered me to go to Russia. I might just take him up in it because I'm intrigued enough. I just might get on the plane and go, but he's doing some really interesting work, and he's coming over to the UK as well. I'm going to speak to him again. He's doing the conference in the UK very soon, so fascinating research what the guys are doing. I think about the Russians, and I know we're out of time almost, Carmen. I want to get some websites in, but I just think what the Russians are doing is like they have this, more open idea or open philosophy on all this. Doesn't seem to be a suppression there. I think they're more open to these philosophies and technologies and ancient history.
Well, and the demonization of all things Russian at this moment. You know, they don't have microwaves, and people say, oh, I hope they catch up soon. It's like, no, they're so advanced, they took them out because they realized they're no good for people.
Yeah.
But this pyramid that I was mentioning was funded by the largest produce company in Russia because they wanted a place to energize the food before it got on the trucks to be delivered to the people. So no GMOs, no microwaves, and pyramid charged food. Oh, okay. Is that better or worse than what we're doing here?
It's the exact opposite, Carmen. It's the exact opposite. Wow. Carmen, we're almost out of time. Yeah, so you're doing the new documentary, New Atlantis. Can't wait to see that. Do we have an idea when that will be wrapped up, or?
Well, I'm just launching an Indiegogo campaign today, actually. And so once the funding comes in to finish it, then I will move forward. I still have I've been in production for a year and a half, but all the animations and the original soundtrack and stuff has to be done. So I'm thinking July next year.
Wow.
Should have another, and it's following the same style as the Pyramid Code.
Nice. Wow. For me, Carmen, I could watch the Pyramid Code all day. There's so much in there, it really captivates anybody who watches it. It really does, because of the way it was done. And I'm definitely looking forward to the next one, Carmen. I've always been wondering would you do another documentary, so it's great to hear that. Carmen, you are also going to be speaking at the Modern Knowledge Tour in Canada. Tell us a little bit about that, and also give a mention there. And I believe you're going to Java as well.
Yeah, so the Modern Knowledge Tour, I did it last year, and it was just a fabulous, good networking event. And so August 29th in Vancouver and August 30th in Victoria. And I'm speaking beside Michael Cremo, Nassim Haramein, and Marty Leeds. Wow. And so that's pretty outstanding because, those people have made a great contribution to our ongoing quest to figure out what the truth was in the distant past. And then Java and Indonesia is an Ancient Mysteries International conference, ancientmysteriesinternational.net. And it's organized by Bruce Cunningham, and I'm a guest host from an academic standpoint. And we're going to Borobudur, to Gunung Padang, where there's another pyramid, and it's been dated at 23,000 years old. And then the Sito and Suku temples. So it's November 30th to December 6th. So that's pretty interesting because, it's a conference and a tour and extremely reasonably priced. So I'm very excited about that.
Awesome. I had Marty Leeds. He was my last show, actually my last radio interview. What an awesome guy he is. He's got some prolific information there to either open your insight and perspective on things, and it's just mind-boggling. Commend him on what he's done too. But yeah, interesting lineup for Modern Knowledge. That sounds really super fascinating. I guess just to wrap up then, Carmen, on the quartz thing, last time since I spoke to you, I've been to Egypt and I made a trip to Abu Ghraib, and I managed to get to see that giant piece of crystal, what looks like a crystal compass. Would that be the best way to explain it? A crystal compass?
Compass?
Well, these arrows, this rectangular circle within a rectangle with these nodules, these arrows pointing on it.
Well, you can call it that. That's fine. But the thing is that it's the quartz crystal basins around that look almost like satellite dishes that have these little places that you can put circles. And I think that in Lee Scallion's work that he used magnets. And so there was something about the energy transmission. But Hakim says that's the lid and that there's a shaft that goes 180 feet down.
Wow.
Right? And so it was definitely a piece of technology. For sure. But I think it coordinated with the other pyramid fields, and that those quartz basins would have, the energy would build between the pyramid sites. So it was fields within fields within fields.
But even that crystal looks machined. When you look at it, Carmen, this stuff looks machined. It's one of the most amazing things I've ever seen. I mean, because I come from an engineering background, and when engineers look at stuff that's been machined in ancient times, we go, oh, what's this like? This isn't supposed to be. This is not what we're told. So.
But in the broken bits on the edges, if a piece comes out, it's a quartz crystal.
Yep.
I mean, they call it alabaster, but it's quartz.
It's quartz, yeah. It's amazing. It's truly amazing.
Truly.
And I think this quartz technology is what they had. What that type of quartz technology it was, Carmen, I'm not quite sure, but they definitely had an infrastructure and a knowledge base and a technology built around quartz. Time and time again, all ancient cultures keep seeing this.
But so do we. I mean, an Ethernet cable, a DVD,
Yep.
a radio, a watch. We've got little pieces of quartz in there. So what would a big piece of quartz do?
Oh yeah. Well, Carmen,
There's another one of those crystal altars at Karnak as well. Did you know that?
I didn't know that. No.
A big one, really big one.
Oh wow! I've got to check that out. I was
right at the first entrance. People walk right by it. They don't even realize it.
You don't even see it there.
No, it looks like just a hunk of rock. It's not as stylized as Abu Ghraib, but it's as big.
It's as big. Well, I may be there in December, so I'm going to check that out, Carmen. I may be in Egypt in December. Fingers crossed everything settles down. Of course, you can check out Carmen Boulter, today's guest, at pyramidcode.com and interactive-u.com. You can check out everything that Carmen does there. Carmen, I really thank you for your time today. It's always enlightening speaking to you, and keep up the good work, Carmen. It's a joy to have you in this field. It really is.
Thank you, James. Pleasure.
Prehistoric Greece and all around the world. And if you're going to understand the ancient world, you're going to have to understand what matriarchy and patriarchy is. And I'm so glad I did that book with Angels and Archetypes with Dr. Carmen Boulter. You can refer to her websites as we're going along today at pyramidcode.com, where you'll see the documentary, The Pyramid Code. If you haven't seen that, then you don't understand Egypt. You need to get a copy of that too. And also interactive-u.com. So without further ado, let's bring on today's guest. Hi, Carmen. You're very welcome to the show.
Hi. Thanks, James. Nice to be back.
Nice to have you back, Carmen. Wow, it's so long since I talked to you last, and I know we've got some mutual friends that interviewed you recently, and there's been recent discoveries. I mean, something also happened 24 hours ago in Egypt. I'm not sure if you caught that, Carmen, about a suicide bomber in Luxor.
I did catch that. I saw that. Yeah.
I don't know what to make of that. I mean, I think it was a lot smaller than people are making out. I don't think it's as big a thing, but it's obviously not good. I'm a little bit troubled about Egypt at the moment, but this stuff happens all the time. There's a little bit of a flare and then things die down. But we are here to talk about different recent events. I know there's been discoveries at the Hawara.
Turned out to be a target for the Air Force.
Wow.
And then, so I kept having the past life memories and having people talk about a site that was really, really old and really deep. And it seemed to be all coming together in terms of the characteristic features that various psychic people I knew were referring to, but nobody could place it. So I thought, well, maybe we can do a satellite scan of this, but nobody had the coordinates of it. So I did the needle in the haystack on Google Earth and found the coordinates. And Klaus Donna called me 5 minutes after I found it. And I went, Klaus, I think I found something. And he said, send me the Google Earth file. And 2 days later, he started sending me impressions of what's down there at great depth. So this technology is state of the art, and it's able to look through layers. So the old GPR, ground penetrating radar, once it hit something, it couldn't look through it. And that's the beauty of this. And it has different signatures for bone and precious metals and all these different things. So they run a different scan based on the signature of what's down there. So there are a total of 82 chambers. On one side, there's two distinct levels, the 31 chambers on one and 32 in the other, and then on a third construction on the other side of the canal. And these chambers are all on the one side bigger than the average size house, but 6 of them are bigger than the average size swimming pool. And there's 63 of these chambers and a kilometer and a half of tunnels to connect them.
Colossal, Carmen. This is colossal statistics.
Colossal. And the area on the edges of it is 81 football fields.
What?
And it's deep. So one level is more than 50 feet deep and one level is more than 120 feet deep.
Could this be somehow, Carmen, a natural feature that's been manipulated and carved by human hands to exploit the natural? We know they did that in the Valley of the Kings. They exploited natural cracks to carve out tombs. Could they have done this to a labyrinth of natural caves?
Well, this would be like burying a few airports. I don't think so. The chambers are far too big for that. The size of an Olympic-sized swimming pool, think about how big that is. I put it into metaphors because it was just inconceivable. And it took me
This is your host, James, and I have a real super delight for my audience today. I'm going to be talking to a returning guest, Dr. Carmen Boulter, and I don't want to get complacent about returning guests. I have a habit of kind of doing that, but a little bit of biography about Carmen before I bring her on. She's a professor at the University of Calgary in Canada, teaches in the Graduate Division of Educational Research in the Faculty of Education. She's been researching and writing about the sacred feminine in ancient Egypt and goddesses around the world for 2 decades. Her book, Angels and Archetypes, which we did before, an evolutionary map of feminine consciousness, which I thoroughly enjoyed and I highly recommend, traces the fragments of information about matriarchal cultures in pre-dynastic Egypt complex. Tell us about this background to this labyrinth complex underneath the ground, Carmen. Great to have updates from you all the time. This place looks fascinating from what I've seen. Absolutely jaw-dropping, Carmen.
Jaw-dropping. It's been talked about for millennia. Herodotus talked about it in 450 BC, and then hundreds of years later, Strabo, Pliny, Sir William Flinders Petrie did an excavation there in 1881. But he went down through the Roman level and then the Ptolemaic level. And that's as far as he went. And he said that there was water underneath. And so people have avoided excavating there because there happens to be a canal over the top. And they thought they were going to have to move the canal to do the excavation. And so everything ground to a halt in 2008. And then I ended up taking an interest in it again. Now I've been looking for a deep, large underground complex for 25 years. And so I spent 5 years in and out of the tunnels inside on the Giza plateau. And then I found a site that may have been it. And I led an expedition there in February 2012, and it turned out to be modern.